Quincas Borba by Machado de Assis is an 1891 uh, novel that was published, I believe, serially, meaning that it was published in parts leading up to I'm not sure how many, the nature of that, but yeah, this is a member of his realist trilogy, meaning the ones where he focuses more on the kind of the kind of realism, kind of similar to kind of Balzac or Dostoevsky, as the central kind of pinnacle of his novels. But the other ones were Don Karasumu, which I've yet to read, and the posthumous memoirs of Braz Cubas. The character of Quintus Barbas was actually refers to two different people. It refers to the dog in the novel that the owner Quintus Barbas owned. Also was kind of an eccentric kind of guy. Actually ends up losing his mind. Borbas is a, and also, forgive me on kind of butchering the Spanish kind of Brazilian words, uh, Portuguese, because that's kind of the language of Brazil. So it's like, but yeah, so it concerns the character of Quintus Borbas actually shows up in the posthumous memoirs of Braz Cubas, as well as one of his philosopher friend. And he shows that same kind of streak of the philosopher guy, that kind of the wise guy, and he throughout the whole novel, there's a bit of a kind of satirical element underlying it, with Hubia's kind of being the unwitting receiving end of like a lot of these the worst lessons ever. He's got like the worst luck in this book. I thought it was a delightful read. But not for any kind of shadow Freud kind of reasons, but just not that I was taking pleasure out of it. But I thought I was just like the way that Assis was able to craft that satirical element without browbeating the characters, but making it seem like, oh well, we're laughing with the characters rather than explicitly at them. It didn't mean it. Kind of in the same way that why am I totally blanking on the name? The French author who wrote, like Flaubert. I think like Assis actually shares the kind of same views with Flaubert of like childbirth. Like there's one thing I can say for sure is that the one good kind of deed that I've done for humanity is the fact that I have not brought any children into this earth. So his view is kind of like maybe a little bit almost of a Schopenhauerian kind of pessimistic view, maybe. Not to kind of put words in his mouth, but yeah. So the character of Quintus Borbas is actually dead for the first few chapters in the novel. So you literally don't get much else from that aside from his central philosophy of life, which is humanitism, I think. And that kind of philosophy kind of underlies a lot of what is kind of lampooning in a way Auguste Comte's, or Comte, I think it's a French pronunciation, his kind of positivism, I think it's called, this idea of Darwinism, social Darwinism, this idea that there are two different potato fields, and that that people put it doesn't matter which one who has the central rights over. Nobody has really any kind of technical rights over any of the land, but there's no such thing as like a kind of a pre-existing kind of I don't know, but it's basically to the winner gets the potatoes is like his whole entire mindset. Like these farmers can put all their work in breaking their neck, but it's like it really just depends on who's the strongest, kind of the first to get there. So what happens is that right away Rubion ends up befriending a man named Cristiano and his wife named Sophia. And right away, these two, there's kind of a foreshadowing kind of thing that I thought was kind of funny a little bit. This idea that he tells them right away that he's like, I've just inherited, I forgot to mention the fact that Rubion inherits all of Quintus Barba's fortune. And then he's like, yes, so the winner becomes in potato, because he was lucky enough to get, the lucky enough to get all that wealth. into his hands, because he's just like an assistant guy to this. He's friend kind of slash kind of assistant to Quincas. So in this case, he's actually um, has at least one kind of good, kind of promising gesture. But what happens is, like, throughout the rest of the novel, poor Hubion is led down into a subterfuge kind of manipulation tactics from Sophia, who is a younger, very beautiful woman who's he right away is kind of smitten with, but it's kind of a puppy love. He's never kind of he never actually, until later on the novel, actually has a reciprocated any of that love in his direction. So what happens is, the only reason that Sophia shows him this amount of attention to begin with, despite no attraction, and kind of finding Hubion to be kind of a foolish kind of person of like no significance, she ends up using him to kind of get into to kind of him and Cristiano kind of both compatibly use him to get to his inheritance. That they want that big fat the inheritance money for themselves. And right away I'm also getting kind of a Pushkin kind of vibes too, of like the way they exploit him too, is the way that kind of reminds me of Eugene Onegin too, a little bit. That kind of that Danified kind of aspect. But anyway, so but yeah, so what happens is that they both start working on a way to strategizing to kind of get him to marry Sophia eventually. And what happens is, like, he starts returning her Hubion's affection, and then establishing a rapport where is not like kind of where in order to they end up kind of moving around and out of Rio de Janeiro. They go on a trip together, and then kind of Cristiano kind of steps out of the picture, and then kind of works in the kind of governmental sphere of things. And there's also a kind of a governmental kind of aspect to the novel too, where Hubion is involved in kind of trying to run for these different things, and he's made out to be. There's a time where I think his character is like actually saves another kind of a young man from getting ran over by a train, I think. So there's like a noble. He has every reason to believe that he has a promising career in this domain, but that ends up fizzling out. Sophia and then Cristiano now start kind of going on the attack, trying to kind of take away his money. So, and what happens eventually is that they win. Like he's gone, and then he finds himself completely just just like broken and desperate at the end of his ropes. And Hubion is like completely dejected, and the last words of the novel is him saying, like, to the winner goes the potatoes, which is basically exemplifying this whole theme that they're this kind of both maybe pointing out that maybe there's a thing to this idea of like Darwinism, like this idea of the class hierarchies like don't really mean anything, or that maybe that there's no such, the only kind of thing propelling us as a kind of a materialistic or materialism, I guess. Like there's no souls to any of us. And I'm not sure exactly what Machado de Assis's, what his personal beliefs were on the matter, if he was someone who had any religious faith at all, or if he was more a kind of just didn't really talk about it. But I think you see maybe him definitely poking fun at kind of Darwinism and this idea that that because it's the irony here is that the bitter truth, or the bitter kind of irony, the tragic kind of Greek variety of it, is that Sophia and Cristiano win. They end up, they do like that. The winner, they do. The winner gets the potatoes. In that case, and that theme kind of runs strong. I think it's the strongest kind of running thing, is that how it ties this novel together. I thought it was a little bit too stretched out. Like there's like a little bit too many avenues where it went into places where Assis was like talking, focusing a little bit too much on Hubion's kind of daily kind of mediocre kind of whereabouts, and him trying to his all the kind of the exact kind of details, like the way he describes, he's a great and a brilliant writer, obviously, needs no stating, but the way he kind of gets a little bit too carried away, describing, like these all the different like things that Hubion or Crucio or the like the long kind of detour of him getting involved in kind of a political scene and trying to assume some kind of power in these all these different kind of mishaps, and there's a lot of it's the whole novel is kind of ripe with that, and I felt like that seemed like a little bit points where there's points where it kind of lost me, but overall I thought it was a very very strong novel. um, yeah, but yeah, a little bit about Assis was that he was born, I want to say, in 18 um, 20s, I think, at the 1821, I believe, and because he lived till I want to say like his early 60s or 70s. I believe he died in 1809. So, but he was a son of slave people. They were basically more than just indentured servants. They were basically the slavery that existed in the United States at the time was probably kind of carried over to like what the landowners and all these people in um, Brazil, where Assis is from, and kind of carried over to his family too. So they were slaves, but they end up, I think, being free later on in life, and they were able to kind of afford a better education and a livelihood for their son. So Machado went on to, to become a kind of a public intellectual. He went on to have his at the age, a pretty young age of like 21 or 22. He was put on like I believe like he was like a editor for like some kind of journal, I think, in his school, I believe. He went to a university, kind of a more prestigious one, I think. And yeah, so yeah, Assis became out to be a pretty established kind of literary, if not like in a literary way, but he had plays too. Like he wrote plays first, and you can kind of get a kind of a dramatist sense in his works, and even in this one too, especially. I felt like the posthumous memoirs, that was a little bit almost like post. It was almost like an echo into the what would be to become of a postmodern kind of tradition before it even happened, and that was like that was like 1885, I think. So yeah, it was very impressive that Assis was able to kind of get a hold on like kind of a prescient grasp on like what that style would be like before it even happened. I mean, um, the idea of like a deceased person memory, like art, narrating their own story, is pretty, and I believe I did a review on that a couple years back. So yeah, yeah. So that's all I have for Quincas Borba by Machado de Assis, and yeah, let me know what you think, and yeah, see you.